Part 2. The Battle of Nivedon. Chapter 1, Journey's End. Kino Amark. It started as a habit, waking up early, running along the shoreline, stopping for breakfast, and asking grandfather about mother. There were many stories I was unaware of, ones I never knew I would still learn. Who would have thought that I would have this chance now? I couldn't wait to find my mother. There were so many questions running inside my head. Who was my father? How come nobody remembers us? Could my mother make the Akeans remember us? Why didn't she give me any power? An undefinable emotion filled my heart. Maybe it was sadness, or perhaps it was resentment. I couldn't exactly point a finger to it. Maybe it was a mixture of both, because how could mother allow me to be bullied by everyone all these moon turns if she had the power to write things into reality? There must be a reason she didn't at least give me a pitiful power. There has to be. Concentrate, Grandpa's loud voice suddenly filled my ears. I took a heapful of breath in and then slowly exhaled. Focus is the key to controlling shuffling. That's what he told me. It was difficult to do because involuntary thoughts kept bothering me. I wanted to go back into the world, back to Kanelan, search for my mother and search for my friends. And maybe, if this was my destiny, do something to help change Akea. Raise your legs higher, Grandpa said. I obeyed even though I could feel my legs starting to get numb. I breathed in for the 100th time and exhaled slowly. Now, go into a sitting position. Chest out. Relax your shoulders. Rest your hands on your knees. I obeyed. I kept my breathing steady. At some point, I could almost feel myself dissolve into something so light, like I was air. The cool sea breeze passed through my nose down to my lungs. And then, just like that, I felt a sensation that I had been yearning to feel again. It was that tingling sensation when I was with Pyper, and she helped me turn myself invisible. I opened my eyes and watched as my hands dissolved into thin air. My arms vanished soon after. The invisibility traveled up to my shoulders and made its way to my legs, down to my very toes. I had gone invisible at will even though I had not been with someone with that power in a long time. I stood up, feeling elated at finally being able to turn invisible without help from anyone. I laughed and screamed and ran around Grandpa. I did it! I yelled. I did it! I continued running around Grandpa, who was grinning broadly. His eyes were trained on the footsteps I was leaving behind on the sand. Then, my body became visible again, and I stopped running. It was only for a brief moment, but at least I could make myself invisible now. I bent over, hands on my knees, gasping for air, and glanced at Grandpa, who was smiling back at me. I was pretty sure that my grin matched his. That was magnificent, he said. You can only get better with a lot of practice. As I said, the key is to focus. He walked toward me and patted me on the shoulder. But it took me such a long time to do that. I mean, if I were to engage in battle, I don't exactly have the time to concentrate much. By the time I become invisible, the Emperor would have torn me to shreds, I said. The excitement of finally turning invisible without needing to be beside Pyper slowly faded away. Any success, no matter how little, is still a cause for celebration, said Grandpa. Can we go back to Kanelan now? I asked. Grandpa chuckled. You learned how to control your power at a minuscule level, and you already want to go back to Kanelan? Aren't we impatient? I heaved a deep sigh. It's Mother. I know she must be searching for me. Or, I don't know. Maybe she's still under the care of the tree runners. Everything has its proper time. Now, you must learn to control your power. Worry not of your mother. She is in good hands, he said firmly, although in his eyes, I could see that he was unsure about what he said. My friends, I began, I don't know where they were. It isn't just Mother and I whose lives were endangered. And there was a time that Mother forgot about me, I said softly, my voice breaking. I could still remember that day when she finally recognized me. Still, I was unable to celebrate because the general's soldiers had already surrounded us in Sinista, and we soon found ourselves running for our lives. It was good that Grandpa seemed to have dismissed what I said about my mother because I was in no shape to tell that story now. At least, Mother's safe with the tree runners. As for my friends, I could not say the same. I did not know where Mayo was. And Pyper too. While she could turn invisible, I knew that she would have stayed there to find a way to help us, and the mere fact that she did not could mean that. I didn't want to entertain the thought. There were also Goemi and Quila. Goemi was not my favorite person because she and her twin, Miroe, lied about my mother. I hated them for that, but if it boils down to whether I would save Goemi from the Emperor's soldiers or not, I was certain that I would still save her, regardless of the lies that the twins fabricated. And then there's Quila. I never had the chance to be friends with her for a long time. But a part of me wanted to ensure that she was somehow safe too. Arden loved her, and because Arden became a good friend, I want to return the favor and protect Quila. Arden saved my life probably more than once. All of them, my friends and family, were out there. They were probably captured or were dying, or the gods only know what, perhaps even having the time of their lives now on a grand, crazy adventure. I felt Grandpa's hand on my shoulder again. "We're going to find them. Don't worry," he said. "But it was my fault," I said, almost lost for words. "It's not your fault that they're friends with you. They probably wanted to," he said, smiling kindly at me. "And friends help each other out. So, when you're ready, we will take the journey to find them. But never before that. Otherwise, you would make yourself vulnerable to the Emperor once again." I understood what Grandpa was saying, but it was difficult to accept nonetheless. "I kept wishing that I should have done more," I said. "They were there for me. They never left me. And I just feel guilty. We will save them if they need saving or find them if they were lost. But don't throw away all the help they afforded you by making yourself an easy target to the Emperor's men." He crouched in front of me and looked straight into my eyes. "I will do whatever I can to protect you," he said. "Whatever I was unable to do for my daughter, I would make sure that I would be able to do for you. I owe it to her. Rest easy, Kino. You are safe here with me." As his eyes stared straight into mine, I could see his sincerity. I nodded and blinked back my tears. "Okay, Grandpa," I said. "I will try not to be so afraid anymore."
Pyper, San Diego. Dogen was riding ahead of me to see if there was any danger in front of us. I made myself and the horse I was riding invisible. This way, in case something went amiss, it would be easier for me to follow Dogen and rescue him. However, I hoped there would be no need for that at any time soon. I nudged my horse to go faster so I could ride beside Dogen. "Do you know that Nivedon is so near Canela?" he said. "We would be there if we rode hard through the night." I frowned. I would know that. There was a time that I ran away from Nivedon and went straight to Wawang village. From there, I met Kino and Mayo and rode a carriage to Kanelan Palace. It was my first time seeing the palace, and the experience was beyond words. The Kanelan Palace rose high enough to rival the mountains in Nivedon. Its walls were so white that they sparkled even in the waning light. And the yard. It was just majestic. Too bad that I was not really able to explore the palace because I did not get to stay very long. Well, who would if the Emperor was chasing you? Yeah. But once we get to the Kanelan gates, how in the world are you going to get past the gates? I asked the burly man. His forehead creased. "I always assumed that you could share with me your invisibility, and we will get inside together." He paused before chuckling. "You know, I can carry you in case your short legs get tired." I flushed. "I told you I wouldn't ask you to carry me again," I said. "Besides, we have horses now. Do you think it would be better to sneak inside invisible?" He turned to me, or since he couldn't see me, to that space where he believed I must be. His eyes missed me by a few feet. "Look at me. Do you honestly think this could go inside unnoticed?" he said, hovering his free hand over his face. "We passed enough posters of your face to know that most Kanelans would probably be able to identify you by now," I replied. "You're right. The best way probably is for us to sneak inside invisible." What's bothering you? He said. I mean, in the past, you wouldn't have minded sharing your invisibility with anyone. I shook my head, knowing he couldn't see me. The truth was, guilt hung over me, knowing all of this started because of my power. If I had not insisted on Kino to present to the Emperor and show that he had Distantecus, and I was not around to make a wooden box float, then the Emperor would not have given the command to kill Kino. If I could turn back time, maybe I would have changed a few things. Like maybe, I would have just kept on torturing the bullies that were taunting Kino in the forest. I sighed too loudly. All right, Dogen said. You can choose not to tell me, but whatever it is that's bothering you, you must put it behind you if you really want to rescue your friends. He paused. I mean, friend. That's weird, right? I said. Dogen said friend instead of friends because Elder Mayan insisted that I only rescue Kino and not Mayo for whatever reason he would not tell me about. I guess, Dogen said. But the Elder must have his reasons. But in case I don't do exactly as he said, I started. Dogen looked at me curiously. Don't tell me that you made a promise, and that you would break it again? Oh, this is bad. He said in a sarcastic tone. It made me smile because this was the first time I heard Dogen sound sarcastic. But really? If Mayo's already there with Kino, what should I do? Keep him locked in whatever dungeon he might be in? I asked. Dogen didn't reply. After a while, he said, all I'm saying is that maybe, you shouldn't keep on making promises if you didn't intend to keep them. Or maybe, the adults should stop making me promise impossible things. I said in exasperation. Mayo's a friend. Did you know that I paused, remembering a memory from a moon turn ago. That he saved my life? Dogen looked at me, but he didn't slow down his horse. No, you've never mentioned that. Well, he did. Mayo saved my life when a serpetus bit me. I turned visible to prove my point. I lifted my skirt enough to show my leg. See that red dot over there? Dogen glanced at the ugly red dot. It would always remind me that the reason I could even ride a horse now was Mayo. He sucked out all the serpetus's venom out of my leg. Dogen heaved a deep sigh but did not argue with me anymore. When we find them, he began. Maybe I should be the one to rescue him. Is that all right with you, kid? I smiled appreciatively. Lovely, I said softly. I knew you were always the kind one. Dogen blushed and grunted, but he did not bother talking to me again. It was funny how he never wanted to be complimented about anything.
Mayo Calo. Whenever it crossed my mind that we escaped the Kanelan Dungeons successfully, my heart would swell with pride, that is, until I realized that food was actually more challenging to come by outside the dungeons. It did not help that Miroe and I were ex-prisoners, which meant that while there were no posters of our faces hanging on lampposts, there still would not be any in the days to follow. This meant that Miroe and I had to be more careful than ever. Here, change first, Miroe said, handing me some garments. Where did you get these? I asked, surprised that just after a few minutes, he was able to come back with what I believe were stolen goods. They won't be missed, don't worry. I found them in the dump, he said. I couldn't tell if he was lying. Your clothes reek of prison. At least if you change into these, you'll just smell as badly as the rest of the vagrants around. I obeyed hesitantly and stripped down to my undergarments. We were on a corner street, and there was no one to see me. I hurriedly slipped on the shirt and pants. When I was done, I brushed my hair up with my fingers, but some hair still fell to my forehead the way it usually does. All right. What's next? I asked. After the words escaped my mouth, my stomach grumbled. Mira's eyes fell. I wanted to get us food, but it wasn't that easy. Well, you understand how having no coins could work to our disadvantage, right? Ever since we escaped, Miroe had treated me a little differently. Before, he treated me like he hated my guts, but now, he only treated me with a wee bit of hostility. Sometimes, he acted as though he was responsible for my safety. Weird. I think we should do that together, I said. I wished Pyper were with us. When Kino, Pyper, and I were traveling in the Lundu market, we had no difficulty looking for food because Pyper could make herself invisible, and it was so easy for her to nick some apples. But now, I guess that Miroe and I would have to make do with anything we could lay our hands on. Even rotting food. The thought made me shudder. We started walking and stopped only when we reached the end of the street. We tried to remain in the dark area to avoid attention. I peered behind him. "What do you think?" I asked. "Keep quiet," he said, obviously annoyed. "There seems to be no one patrolling around. Maybe we can slip into the wet market. But act normal, all right?" Before I could react, Miroe walked ahead whistling. He sounded confident. I followed after a while, trying to imitate his swagger. We continued walking around until we blended with the crowd. Soon enough, we found ourselves entering the wet market. The vendors were all shouting, and a huge crowd surrounded a food stall where Miroe stood nearby. After a while, I lost sight of him. I craned my neck to search for him to no avail. I decided to just wait for him. I saw him slipping past some bystanders. He glanced at me and walked straight toward me. Then, he handed me a raw banana. It was so green that I had to frown at it. Nevertheless, I peeled it and devoured it since there was nothing else. We started walking again. "There's a lot of talk in here. About things that are coming," Miroe said. I mumbled as I continued to gobble the banana. It was still a little bitter and starchy, but it would do. "There are talks that the Emperor is on the rounds, ensuring that the provinces still support him." "That's weird. Why wouldn't they be?" Miroe shrugged. "Beats me. I have not had an encounter with the Emperor yet, but there would be pretty soon." I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. "Why is that?" I asked. "Not your business," he replied tersely. "No. It's my business too. If you are going to kill the Emperor, then I don't know. I would be happy about it, I guess. That's only because he endangered my life. However, if that happens, there would be chaos after that. Everyone would fight to be the next emperor. I mean, will killing the Emperor be worth it?" I wondered loudly. "I'm not going to kill the Emperor," he hissed. "What makes you think I would do something like that?" "Well, you've always been a runaway. Maybe. I don't know. Just the crazy side of you still lingers behind that crazy ponytail you wear now." I continued munching on the banana. Miroe chuckled. "If I didn't find you so funny, I would have ditched you immediately after we escaped the dungeons." My heart beat rapidly. "But you're not going to do that, right?" I exclaimed. "I mean, we're in this together, right, you and me? You know how bad my power is. I can't fend off the soldiers. Don't leave me." I was practically panicking by this time that I turned around and grappled at his arms. "Shut up!" Miroe hissed. "Quit shaking me. I'm not going to leave you. At least, not until I'm certain you're safe." I wondered how I would be safe again. "So, when are we leaving Canela?" "The gates could be tricky. We need to find a way to get out without being caught. But from what I heard, getting out is much easier. So, it should be easy for us as soon as we make up our minds on when we're going to." Miroe shook his head. "We're not leaving Canela." I swallowed the last of the banana, and thankfully so. Otherwise, I might have choked on it after hearing what Miroe said. "Why? What are we going to do here? Are you going to help me get the registry?" The Akene Registry is the book that chronicles the power of all the citizens in Akea, whoever presented to the Emperor. It makes sure that all the powers can be monitored, and hence, it serves as a deterrent to the misuse of powers for criminal purposes. Of course, it is not foolproof. If you have a criminal mind, the power could still be subjected to abuse, which is why there were always the dungeons and the gallows. Miroe was silent. "I owe you one," he said. "I think I can help you retrieve it, and then after that, we can go our separate ways. Is that all right with you?" The prospect of getting my hands around the Akene Registry was so great that I almost nodded. "But you said you wouldn't leave me behind unless you're certain I am safe." "All right. We'll get the registry, and after that, I'll find a way to ensure you're safe. Then, I will leave you." I have other plans. He was starting to sound annoyed. I nodded eagerly. The thing is, I simply thought of Miroe's power as evil until that time we used it to escape. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be away from that kind of power, especially since he considered himself indebted to me. Ha! What were you planning to do? I asked. I scrunched my nose as the stench of decaying fish entered my nostrils. We should get out of here, I added. I told you it's none of your business, he said firmly. I decided to let the question go. I would try as much as possible not to be left behind by Miroe. You want to rescue Kino? I said, hopefully. Miroe stopped. Do you know where he is? No. How many times do I have to tell you? Well, all the more reason we should stay here. If any of the soldiers had caught him, he would surely be delivered to the Emperor. My eyes turned into angry slits. Why do you sound happy about it? I yelled. Not happy, he said. Just indifferent. We have to rescue him. Use your power. Don't tell me what I should do with my power. A hopeless case, I thought. Miroe would always be the crazy one. Now, if only I had his power, wow. Imagine what I could do with it. I could make myself the most powerful man in Akea. I could kill anyone. Everyone. I shivered. I wouldn't do that. But Miroe could. The question is, would he? I peered at Miroe from the corner of my eye and wondered what that crazy head of his was thinking. I shivered again. Suddenly, I wanted to run far, far away from him as fast as possible. Louis Monsieur. General Renner Calo had asked me to search for his son, and I thought that I could do it sooner. The first thing I visited were the inns, where gossip lay bountifully. I learned that Mayo Calo, the general's son as they referred to him, was in the dungeons. Though I had received that news in shock, I finished my ale before I went back to the room I rented and wrote correspondence to General Renner Calo. I didn't know how to begin my letter, except I had to tell him the truth about his son's whereabouts. Your boy is in the Kanelan Dungeons. I will do my best to rescue him, but as you know, no one escapes the dungeons alive. After that, I went out again immediately and waited for the most reliable footman to deliver my message to the general. Soon enough, the footman received my note without question. After handing him a gold coin, he immediately trotted off. I had to move fast. Once the general arrives, I must have more news for him. For now, I had to find out where Mayo was being kept. The Kanelan dungeon was quite complex and ran almost the entire underground of Kanela. While I planned things out, I decided to return to the inn and have my fill of ale again. Good times were coming. After I retrieve the Calo boy, I will be off to look for Emperor Amark. It was a small prize for all my hardships.